Closer, even you, low.
Yep.
Who is a Harry Potter fan? Maniac Harry Potter. I'm really excited for the new movies because they're American. And that British lead, thank you. Across the street is two streets. Flamel. Yes, he was real. Very real. And if you see this church right here, the tower remains. The church burned down in the Revolution because it was primarily wood. The Tower Saint-Jacques, remains. However, the story of Nicolas Flamel kind of has a midpoint here. This is where he was buried. Now, in the movie As Above, So Below, also known as Catacombs in France, you could actually go to his grave underneath us in the catacombs. However, I want to make it very clear. The catacombs are not below us, they're on the other side of the river. There's a little bit under Sacré-Cœur where they filmed the movie Catacombs, but they're on the other side of the river. Now, Nicolas Flamel was born in the year 1313. He moved to Paris in his teenage years, and he could do something only about 5% of the public could do, which was what?
Read.
And?
Translate.
And write. Okay, some people could read and not write. X marks the spot, actually, the signature X is actually for people that can't read or write. Okay. And he married a young woman named Pernelle Flamel. And he became basically he did a little accounting, traded and sold pamphlets and books, because back then you would have pamphlets, not books. Like, the brochures you would have everything written on a pamphlet. And the printing press was not invented yet. That was another 100 years off. Nicolas Flamel became fairly well off. He was bourgeois, which is middle class at that time. Educated middle class. Doctors, lawyers, accountants. They called these guys scriviers. Now one day, a young man comes into the shop with a 20-page pamphlet, which is pretty big at the time because you got to hand write everything. And he offered to sell him this pamphlet. There's a pamphlet written in Iberia, which was civilized. Remember, Europe was in the Dark Ages at the time. Iberia, during the Muslim rule, until 1492, was in an enlightened era. I'll get into that another time. But the Muslims ruled, and that's where algebra was invented, geometry, the zero, all of these great inventions were during the great enlightenment of the Muslim culture, which was around the 10th to 15th century. Alchemy. The Jews wrote the Kabbalah, the book of the Kabbalah called the Zohar at this time in Iberia, under Muslim rule. This book was written in Hebrew and Latin, and claimed to have a bigger book in Iberia. So Nicolas Flamel said, "Oh, it's very beautiful." He bought it, put it on his bookshelf. Now, one of the ways that he found his wife was she could read and write as well. Pernelle was not a typical French woman. She was very well educated at the time. And women like that had to keep their ability to read and write fairly discreet. It wasn't legal, it just wasn't proper for women to read and write at the time. Well, girls, until 2012, you couldn't wear pants legally in Paris. Okay? And I called the police on my ex-wife for that. The cops laughed at me, but it was illegal. It was a 60-euro fine if you wore pants. You had to wear a skirt. It was improper and indecent. Isn't that cool? I don't know if tights would be the problem.
They should bring that law back. Bring it back.
I would love it, man. That'd be great. Calling the police on my girlfriend when she gets out of line. You're wearing pants, woman. I don't think it would go over well. So, Pernelle, according to the legends that I read, actually was the one who was down in the basement playing around with the alchemy. She was rocking it. She managed to turn lead into silver. And Nicholas was like, man, this is pretty cool. I'm going to try this stuff out. Suddenly, both of them became very, very wealthy. Very wealthy. And they became something only aristocrats could do, was very big donation. They made very big charitable donations, particularly to Saint-Jacques Church, where they built their own crypt and their own chapel. 1408, 100 years later, Purnell finally dies. They bury her in the church. 10 more years go by, and Nicolas Flamel is trying to continue his research. He discovered how to turn lead into gold, evidently, or lead into silver at least, because he became very wealthy, and a scrivener can't make that much money. So, he finally dies in probably around 1418. He's buried in the church. He designed his own tombstone in his twilight years, which you can still see at the church over at the Museum of Cluny across the river, the old Roman bath. When the revolution came around, the church burned down. They opened his grave. They only found Purnell's bones. And ever since then, legend has it, some have tied him to the Count Saint-Germain, who lived in the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th century, finally dying in 1844 and buried in Germany. Kind of like a Count of Monte Cristo, but immortal. Some say he became a vampire. Who knows? But what I do know is his bones were not in there, and you can go see his gravestone across the river. When the church was finally demolished, his gravestone was passed around. It's used to cut up fish. It was used as a tailor's thing, and then they finally figured out what it was, and they returned it. So, a couple references. If you see the movie Catacombs, As Above, So Below. It's a fun movie. It's completely inaccurate until they get to the point where there's no graffiti on the wall. That's how you'll know it's the fake catacombs. Getting down there, you don't need rappelling equipment. The catacombs are 308 kilometers of tunnels, and that's a whole nother story. But that's our alchemy story. I'm curious if the legend that I just recently heard that Nicolas Flamel is alive and well as of 2014 in the hills of Goa, India. Kind of like Michael Myers is the love doctor. It's a guru.